range of ages all existed together, but that was the birth seat of each one teach one.
Right.
And that was, to me, my way of looking at it, a very underground and revolutionary process.
Right.
They were not looking at the curriculums that white folk deemed appropriate. They were saying, let me tell you how to be larger in this world. Let me tell you how not to be what he says you are. And we lost all of that when we had this whole quest for integration.
Right.
We lost that. But I am very much about the tradition of flying underneath the radar. I do not follow the practices or the curriculums of mainstream education. My students, and they're black and brown, are getting education that will help them be larger. They're not being spoon-fed.
Right.
They're not being force-fed.
Right.
It's about countering the damage that they've received in those traditional classrooms. So.
Very good answer. Now, I mean, that just reminded me, I mean, what you just said just brought out so much in terms of, you know, just my thinking on education. And you're absolutely right. Educe is to bring out that which is already in.
That's right.
And so in the article, the minister pointed out how Master Herman Muhammad, who's the founder of the Nation of Islam, when he was 6 years old, saw himself pushing the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the DuPonts, and the Mellons into a lake of fire. You know, basically taking those people who were the rich, the bloodsuckers of the poor, and just pushing them off the face of the earth.
Someone ought to.
Right. And his father, seeing that in him, began to cater his education towards what the young man had already saw in himself. And so that speaks to the way we really should educate our children, not according to the way that this current system does, because like you said, this system is more of an indoctrination than an education, because we're just trying to indoctrinate students to fit into a system that's already in place that, like you stated, only profits a certain few, but the masses of the people still poor.
That's right.
Poor, ragged, hungry, naked, and out of the doors.
That's right. And that speaks to the importance of us being willing enough and ready enough to claim our children's futures. In other words, to create the institutions that will teach them properly and treat them properly, not to rely on some man who historically has always abused you and miseducated you to somehow show some mercy with your baby. He's never shown it before. Why would we expect him to show it now? So institutions like Institute of Global Scholarship here in Denver are doing that work. That's why I appreciate them so much. That's where my children are. And, you know, it's interesting to me and very telling to me, you know, my little boy, Amir, as his introduction to the school, when they had to give their name and sort of say something about themselves, said, "My name is Khalik Amir and I'm God." In a traditional classroom, that would have been checked immediately. They would have begun the process of convincing him, you are absolutely not that, you know. But IGS held him close and said, no doubt, little brother, we're going to help you grow into that for sure. So, yeah, it's important that we really claim those things for ourselves.
One more question on this subject. And it was another key point that the minister made, and really one that he kept repeating, which, you know, repetition drives the point home. But he used the metaphor, and he referred to the majority of us as dumb devils. He talked about dumb devils and a wise Satan. What did that mean to you?
You're dumbed down, and so you become the purveyor of evil without even knowing that that's what you're doing. And Satan, in that context, is certainly wiser than you, because he's the puppeteer. And you're not even aware that your strings are being pulled. But you're doing his work. So it's a perfect metaphor. It's a perfect metaphor, dumb devils. It's interesting in this whole conversation about democracy and this war to bring democracy to a country. And you can't force democracy onto anybody, because my understanding is democracy is of, for, and by the people. So if you force it, it's not that. But democracy, the etymology of that is literally
right.
ignorant masses led by a devil.
Right.
So it's appropriate. It fits.
Absolutely.
It fits.
And I mean,
Yes.
just speaking of that, I mean, that's a perfect example of dumb devils.
That's right. And wise
and
Satan.
wise Satan.
Perfect.
Because dumb, of course, not having knowledge. Devil, meaning that, you know, you creating mischief and causing bloodshed. And that's what we do. Because, you know, when this so-called war against Iraq first started, of course, it was under the guise of weapons of mass destruction.
Right.
You know, and they had our brother Colin Powell sitting up there lying, didn't even look right, you know, just lying. And the masses of the public, dumb devils, just went right along with
That's right.
the orchestrators of this foreign policy, wise Satan, and here we are.
Here we are. We do that. We do that on a small scale, and we do that on a global scale.
Right.
You know, it's like the brothers that are buying ice like crazy, but have given no thoughts to the diamond mines in Sierra Leone.
Right.
You know, you're perpetuating those things. So
what's the answer?
The answer is you have to repudiate much of what you've been taught here in order to even begin to see a little bit.
Right.
You have to repudiate almost all of it. And that's a scary thing, because it might mean standing against your parents.
Right.
You know, what your grandmama always told you, what she always fed you. It might mean that. And a lot of folks are not willing to stand in that. It's hard. It's hard to stand against systems and say, I accuse.
Right.
You know, I see you. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that, but that is what is required.
Absolutely. And it's what's right. And, you know, greats in history have always stood against current systems in order to bring about change. I mean, what if Christopher Columbus would have submitted and said, okay, the world is flat? Or
we'd see more Native Americans, that's for sure. Had he done that, there'd be more indigenous people walking around had he done that.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't have been a triangular trade had he done that.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know. It's an interesting thing, but it is important to repudiate. That's why, you know, in many ways, I've heard people refer to Martin Luther King as sort of like a social revolutionary, but they call Malcolm X a cultural revolutionary. To me, that one holds more weight. Social revolutionary just means that he was attempting to change society. But Malcolm was really saying we need to change the way we see ourselves. And that holds more power, because the society piece, you're asking me to put a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. But if I can change myself, you know, then I am the change I want to see in the world.
Absolutely.
So.
And that's key too. You know, just self, that knowledge of self, because in my view, that's the answer. Master Herman Muhammad, when he came, you know, he said the six most prolific, powerful words ever to be said in the history of humanity, and that is, accept your own and be yourself. And, you know, when we study our own and accept ourselves, man, that really holds the key to the answer of all of our problems. You know, because that's what this was about. You know, because that's one of the things that the minister told us, that, man, this lecture is really about yourself. You know, so.
Right, and what is your willingness? What are you willing to do?
Right.
What are you willing to do?
Yes, ma'am. Now the next piece, because you know, and we've stated before for our viewers that the Final Call has stories that are international, stories that are national. It has stories that are local. It has articles that are spiritual. It has, I mean, it just contains the gamut of everything that our people need in the way of information. And another interesting feature of the paper appears on page 34 in this particular issue, which deals with a youth activity page. And this article is written by a young sister out of Columbus, Ohio. The sister's name is Nisa